So now that the JBL Partybox on the Go is here, people want to know how it stacks up against the UE Hyperboom. Now, just a disclaimer, I absolutely love the Hyperboom. It's been my go-to speaker for the bulk of 2020, and I prefer this speaker over the JBL Boombox 2. But let's see how JBL's new portable Bluetooth speaker stacks up against the UE Hyperboom.
Now, price-wise, the JBL Partybox on the Go retails for $300, whereas the Hyperboom retails for $400. Now, I know this $100 price difference between these two speakers might be a deciding factor for some people, but you really do get a considerable return on investment on those extra $100 if you go with the Hyperboom. Nonetheless, if you want to pick either of these speakers up, it will be linked down below. And if you want to learn more about either of these speakers, please watch their full reviews because we're only going over their main differences. Now, first off, let's talk about the designs and portability of these speakers. Now, the Partybox is considerably larger and heavier than the Hyperboom. Now, even though the Partybox does have a shoulder strap, which does help lugging the speaker around, taking this 16.5-pound speaker on the go with you is rather cumbersome, mainly because of its sheer volume. Whereas the Hyperboom is smaller and it is a little lighter, weighing in at 13 pounds. Now, even though this speaker doesn't have a shoulder strap like the Partybox, it does have a built-in rubber carrying handle, which is super durable. So overall, the Hyperboom's smaller size and lighter weight just make it way easier to carry around with you than the Partybox. But then, there's also materials. The Hyperboom has a mostly fabric body which is going to stand up to constant bumps and scrapes without any problems. Whereas the Partybox is rocking a mostly plastic body and grille on the front, so it can be a scratch magnet. But both of these speakers do have an IPX4 rating, meaning that neither one of them is afraid of a little water. Nonetheless, if you're looking for a large portable Bluetooth speaker to take on the go with you, the Hyperboom is the easier speaker to carry around here. And there's also the fact that it's a vertical speaker, so the speaker does take up less table space than the Partybox. But something the Partybox does have going for it is that it does have a built-in light feature, whereas the Hyperboom is just a big rectangle. Now, the light feature on the Partybox really does look great, and you do have 3 different lighting modes to choose from. However, just keep in mind, you cannot customize the light feature on this speaker through JBL's Partybox app like you can with the Partybox 310, which was announced alongside the speaker. Now, personally, I do think this is a shame, and I would like for JBL to eventually add app support to the Partybox OTG.
But now let's talk about battery life because there are some major differences here. Now, the Hyperboom has an advertised battery life of 24 hours, but that's when it's playing at 50% volume. Whereas the Partybox has an advertised battery life of 6 hours, but that's when it's playing at 50% volume with its light feature turned off and with its bass boost feature turned off as well. And quite frankly, when the speaker is playing with its bass boost feature turned off, it does sound rather flat for its sheer size and weight. Now, the Partybox has a bass boost feature to it, which has 2 levels to it, and I'm assuming that most people are going to use this speaker while in bass boost level 2. Whereas the Hyperboom has a fully customizable EQ, but even with its stock EQ, this speaker still has a lot of bass to it. Now, real-world use with the Partybox playing at 80% volume, with its light feature turned on, and with its bass boost feature set to level 2, we're looking at a real-world battery life of around an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of playback time, which quite frankly really isn't all that impressive given this speaker's sheer size and weight. And keep in mind, if you use this speaker at a higher volume, then its battery life is going to drain even faster. Whereas with the Hyperboom, real-world use with this speaker playing at 80% volume, we're looking at a battery life of around 8 to 9 hours of playback time, and at max volume, this speaker is good for 3 hours of playback time. And keep in mind, at max volume, the Hyperboom gets way louder than the Partybox. So if portability and battery life is a really big deal to you, then the Hyperboom is the way to go here. But now let's talk about connectivity. Both of these speakers can be connected to 2 Bluetooth devices at the same time. They both have an easy-to-reach 3.5mm audio jack, and they both have a USB-A out port so that you can charge your own devices. But with the Partybox, you can also play music off of a USB drive if you want to. Whereas with the Hyperboom, the USB port on it is strictly used for charging your own devices. And personally, I do wish the Hyperboom had a USB-C port instead, because a lot of newer phones these days are starting to come included with USB-C cables.
Now, another thing the Partybox does have going for it is that it does have a microphone and guitar input, which could be useful for like events. Whereas the Hyperboom does have an optical port, so you could hook it up to your TV and use it as a soundbar if you don't already have one. But also, the Partybox does come included with its own wireless microphone. Now, just keep in mind, the dials on this speaker are strictly used for adjusting the echo, treble, and bass of any microphone or guitar you might have hooked up to the speaker. These dials are not used for adjusting the sound of your music. But now let's talk about listening to music with these speakers. When it comes to speaker setups, these speakers are very different from one another. The Partybox on the Go has a single frontward firing woofer with frontward firing exhaust ports, and it has dual tweeters. Whereas the Hyperboom has dual angle firing woofers, dual tweeters, and it also has a pair of passive radiators shooting out the back. So with the Hyperboom, you are getting considerably more hardware in a smaller and lighter package. Now, we're going to be jumping into a sound test. Like I mentioned earlier, the Partybox does have a bass boost feature, and it has 2 levels to it. But for this sound test, we're strictly going to be using the speaker while in bass boost level 2. And even though the Hyperboom does have a fully customizable EQ, we're going to be using it while in its stock EQ.
Yeah. MD, JPB, it's only right, baby.
Yeah, why you mad? I got a bag, bro. Name hot in these streets, no Tabasco. But I'm so stuck, that's a fact, yo. And if you think I'm frontin', you can run it back, yo. Go on, run it back. You know that I run it. Everything you wanna do, I already done it. And I got your little boo telling me she love me. I got this one, that one. Damn, it's gonna be a long night. Yeah. You know. I said, damn, it's gonna be a long night. Yeah, let's go. Look. I told Shorty drop it for a real one. Yeah. Go ahead and pop it, let me feel some. Do it for the boy with a bag now. Movie star money making everybody act out. I don't lie to these women, if I want them, then I tell them. Don't get fly for these women, I was born with these propellers. All my haters cannot beat me, so I call them acapellas. See, I'm only getting better, you only get jealous. You know that I run it. Everything you wanna do, I already done it. And I got your little boo telling me she love me. I got this one, that one. Damn, it's gonna be a long night. You know. I got this one, that one. Damn, it's gonna be a long night. Yeah. MD. JPB. You already know, baby. Yeah. I said, I already done it. Everything you wanna do, I already. You know that yeah. I said, you know that yeah. Damn, it's gonna be a long night.
So when it comes to sound, I gotta say the Hyperboom sounds more open and it also has more bass, which leads to a more balanced listening experience. Whereas the Partybox does sound narrow with less bass. But another thing with the Hyperboom is that thanks to its rear firing passive radiators, you can always up the bass on this speaker by simply placing it up against a wall, so that its bass has something to bounce off of. Now, I didn't place the Hyperboom up against a wall in this sound test to give the Partybox a fighting chance, because you simply just can't do that with the Partybox because it has frontward firing exhaust ports. But yeah, by itself, the Hyperboom does have noticeably more bass than the Partybox, but you can always get even more bass out of it by simply placing it up against a wall. Now, when it comes to max loudness, again, this is an area where the Hyperboom clearly comes out on top. Off of straight battery power, the Hyperboom gets way louder than the Partybox. Now, even though JBL does market the Partybox as being a 100-watt RMS speaker, that's when the speaker is plugged in. When it's running off of its internal battery, the Partybox is a 50-watt RMS speaker. So if you use the speaker while it's plugged in, it is going to get a little louder, and it's also going to push out more bass. But even when it's plugged in, the Partybox still isn't a match for the Hyperboom, which is still louder and pushing out more bass, even with just its battery power. However, just keep in mind, with the Hyperboom, you aren't going to get a performance bump out of it if you use it while it's plugged in. It's still going to perform the same, which isn't a good or a bad thing. Personally, I like that you are getting the full potential out of the Hyperboom, even with its battery power. But overall, the Hyperboom does sound and perform better than the Partybox. But finally, let's talk about the actual little features found on these speakers. Like I mentioned a few times already, the Hyperboom does have a fully customizable EQ, so you can mix sound however you want. Whereas with the Partybox, all you can do is just raise its bass through its bass boost feature. But you can't adjust its mids or highs. Another feature that I really like about the Hyperboom is that you can power it on or off remotely through its app, and you can also easily switch sources if you've got it hooked up to any other audio sources. And you can also easily pair the Hyperboom to other UE speakers through its app that support Party Up. So this might be another Hyperboom, a Boom 3, a Mega Boom 3, or a few other UE speakers.
Whereas when it comes to pairing the Partybox on the go to other speakers, there is some major fragmentation to keep in mind here. Now you can pair one Partybox on the go to one other Partybox on the go, so you can get left and right stereo sound going. However, you cannot pair a Partybox on the go to any other Partybox speakers. So for example, if you've got a Partybox on the go and a Partybox 310, you cannot wirelessly pair them up together, and I do think that is unfortunate. And also keep in mind, you cannot pair a Partybox on the go to any of JBL's other speakers using JBL's Party Boost. So for example, you can't pair a Partybox on the go to a JBL Boombox 2.
So overall, even though the Hyperboom might be a little more expensive than the Partybox on the go, you are getting a major return on investment on the extra cash spent. The Hyperboom sounds better, gets considerably louder, has more bass, and has significantly better battery life than the Partybox on the go, all while in a smaller and lighter package. And the Hyperboom also has a fully customizable EQ and a remote on and off, which is nice to have. So, if you're an average user looking for a large portable Bluetooth speaker, then hands down, the Hyperboom is still the way to go. Whereas the Partybox on the go is really only suited for someone who plans on constantly using the microphone and or guitar input on the speaker, or constantly using the included wireless microphone to host an event or something. But ultimately, the Partybox on the go is a speaker you're better off using mostly while it's plugged in, because of its real-world battery life isn't all that impressive, and if you do want to use it to its fullest potential, you gotta use it while it's plugged in. And since this speaker is rather large, taking it on the go with you is rather cumbersome. And even though this speaker does have a great looking light feature, ultimately, when it comes to sound, it does leave you wanting more. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.